Today's passage is from the book of Revelation, chapter 21. Verse 22, verses chapter 22, verse 5. Revelation 21, 22 through chapter 22, verse 5. I did not see a temple in the city, because the Lord Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor onto it, or into it. On no day will its gates ever be shut, for there will be no night there. The glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it. Nothing impure will ever enter it, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, down the middle of the great street of the city. On each side of the city, on each side of the river, stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They will not need the light of a lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever. So we're nearly done with the book of Revelation. Next week will be the last week in this book. And in today's passage, John talks about heaven. And throughout Revelations, there's been a lot of focus on persecution and temptation and perseverance and faithfulness. And in today's passage, John wants to remind us why we go through all this. He wants to encourage us. And he's going to talk a little about heaven. I began this topic last week. As we're continuing on with it, I thought it appropriate to have another edition of Brian's Bad Jokes about heaven. Here we go. There were two men, Bob and John, and they had been friends since grade school. They got to the point where they're in their 80s, and Bob fell gravely ill. And John went to visit his friend in the hospital, and both men recognized that Bob probably would not survive the night. So they talked about their lives, and they talked about the things they enjoyed of their long friendship. At one point, John said, "You know, Bob, I haven't been able to play baseball in like 15 years. I really liked playing baseball. Do you think there's baseball in heaven?" And Bob said, "John, you've been my best friend my whole life. When I get to heaven, I'll find out if there's baseball, come back and I'll tell you." Well, Bob died that night. And then a few nights later, Bob appeared to John in a dream. And John said, "Bob, you kept your word, you came back. Is there baseball in heaven?" And Bob said, "Well, I've got good news and bad news." And John said, "What do you mean?" And Bob said, "You're slated to pitch on Wednesday." I don't know if there's baseball in heaven. I mean, I don't see why not, but I can't tell for you for sure. But today's passage is about heaven. It's about what will be and what will not be in heaven. And I think that John is trying to encourage us in this passage. The book of Revelations is a lot about temptation and perseverance and persecution and faithfulness. And John wants to encourage us now to keep the faith, to hold on to what we know is true and good. Because throughout the book of Revelation, there's no pretense that the Christian life is easy. Living a Christian life is certainly better, but it's rarely easier. As I say, nothing worth having is easy. And in this chapter, John wants to remind us that no, the Christian life isn't easy, but there is a point. There is a reward. And so he wants to encourage us by telling us about the reward of heaven that God has in store for those who overcome. Last week I talked about Jesus as the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning of all things and the end of all things. And in today's passage I want to continue along those lines, talking about the things that Jesus will end in heaven and then the things that will begin in heaven. First, we're told that in heaven there will be no temple. I gotta say, as Americans today, I'm not sure if we really can get the significance of that. Saying there's no temple isn't that big of a deal to us. It'd be like saying that soldiers will no longer carry broadswords into battle. Again, the broadsword changed the course of warfare forever, but it's been obsolete for a very long time. That's sort of like the temple was. It was immensely important in its time, but it's been obsolete to us. The temple was unique. It was one of a kind. It was the place to go to meet God. There was nowhere else in the world you could truly go to worship the Lord. And when the temple was destroyed, when the first temple was destroyed in 500 BC, when the second temple was destroyed in 70 AD, the nation of Israel was destroyed. There was no temple, so there was no way to really worship God. That's not true for us today. We have a church building, but it's not like the temple. The building is just a place for us to gather and worship, but the church is the people. We recognize that we can worship God anywhere. We can talk to God at any time. We can talk to God when we're driving down the road. We can talk to God in our home. We can talk to God at work, at school. If we just have a couple of minutes of our own, we can always go straight to the Lord. Well, we're told that in heaven there will be no temple. That is, there's no place to go to worship God. Today we're a little bit closer to that than the Israelites were. That is, we can always come to God wherever we are. In heaven, that idea reaches its completion. We're told that we will see God face to face. We won't need to go to a temple. We don't need to go to a church building if we want to worship the Lord, if we want to have communion with other believers. It will be always right there. That connection with God will be in front of us at all times, that anyone can reach out and have it at any moment. We will see God face to face. We won't need a temple anymore to find the Lord. Second, we're told there will be no sun or no moon. This calls back to the first chapter of Genesis. When God created the heavens and the earth, on the first day, we're told he said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Then, on the fourth day, God created the sun and the moon. And as there was light before there was a sun. This light was not coming from the sun, it was coming from God. Now we're told that in heaven there will be no sun, that we will see by the light of God himself. And light makes things clear. This is more than just physical light. This is a way to reveal the truth. And there was a time when I could walk around my house in the dark. I could walk from room to room. I knew where the layout of the house, I knew where the furniture was. I could move around, wouldn't bump into anything. Now, I never know where James has left a toy, or if he's pulled a chair out in the middle of the room, because he can do that now. So I need a light. I need to be able to see where I'm going. This light of heaven is a light that reveals the truth. There will be no more darkness. There will be no more night. There will be no more doubt or confusion. The light of God shall reveal all truth to us. It will no longer be in the dark. Third, we're told the gates will never shut. Now, a gate in a city was the city's primary defense. If an enemy attacked, if there was an enemy at the gate, then they would shut the gates to keep the enemy out. We're told in heaven, as John describes heaven like a city, that the gate of this city will never shut. That is, there's no enemy left. There's no force left to fight against. There's no physical enemy, no spiritual enemy, no symbolic enemy. And there's no physical enemy. Of course, no human force could assail heaven. There's no spiritual enemy. This The devil, Satan, the enemy, the accuser of God's people, will face his final defeat, never to return. There won't even be a symbolic enemy. There won't be death or sin or fear to fight against. There'll be no enemy of any kind. Franklin Roosevelt famously said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." John describes heaven as a place where we don't even have that fear. C.S. Lewis once said that heaven is the place where you can't feel afraid even if you try. In heaven, the gate will never be shut because there will never be any enemy. Fourth, there will be no curse. This calls back to the third chapter of Revelation, or excuse me, third chapter of Genesis. When Adam and Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they rebelled against God, and God put them under a curse. And this is a curse against all humanity. Everyone in this room, everyone we've ever met, has been born and lived under this curse. It's all we've ever known. The curse is death. That from the moment we are born, we start dying. And we are dying a little bit every day. But the removal of the curse means there is no death. Because the curse goes beyond just death. The curse is a curse against relationships. That all relationships are a little bit tainted. The husband and wife, parent and child, relationships that were supposed to be encouraging and uplifting and sanctifying are all have a little bit of darkness in them now. There's a curse against the ground. Work. Work that was meant to be satisfying and bring a sense of accomplishment now is difficult, even painful. And food that comes from the ground was meant to nourish us is now a little tainted. Everything in this world is a little tainted. The promise of God is the end of the curse. A place where death has lost its place, where relationships are what they were supposed to be. Their work, and I do believe there is work in heaven, will be something that brings inspiration and encouragement, something that brings a sense of satisfaction in life instead of a drudgery. The promise of God is that when we reach heaven, the curse shall be lifted forever. So it's worth mentioning that when Adam and Eve first sinned, God did not have to curse them. He didn't have to bring the curse of death. He could have left us alive forever in that sinful state. We could have lived eternally, getting by, but for all eternity, never quite being free of sin, never quite reaching our full potential. But God didn't choose that. He chose to allow the curse of death to enter this world so that one day he could lift the curse and remove sin entirely from our lives. And that is the promise we have in heaven. So he promises to end some of the things of this earth. But John also talks about a promise to begin new things. And he tells us several things that will be in heaven. First, he says there will be a river. Okay, great. A river doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but throughout the Old Testament, a river had symbolic importance. A river was a source of life and nourishment and strength. Probably the best example of this is the first Psalm. And the first Psalm, the psalmist describes a person who loves God's law like a tree planted by streams of water. That because it is by this river, that it has nourishment, it will not wither. It will grow. It will produce fruit. It will prosper. And now, John says that there was a river flowing from the throne of God. There will be a nourishment, a source of strength unlike anything else. And along those same lines, we're told there will be a tree of life in heaven. I think I mentioned before, this is one of my favorite images in the book of Revelation. The tree of life is there, standing on both banks of the river of life. And notice that, one tree on two different banks. This is like those giant redwoods out in California that are so big you can drive a car through them. Compared to this tree, those redwoods are a child's miniature toy. This tree is so big, a river, not a stream, a river is flowing through it, and yet it is on both banks of that river. The image John is playing with is that the tree of life was created in the Garden of Eden, and it's just been growing since then. Now it is so vast, it spans across the river. We're told it produces its fruit, 12 crops of fruit it produces each month. Now, when I first read that long ago, I thought that John was saying that there will be one crop of fruit each month for 12 months. So you get blueberries one month, apples another month, and I don't know, watermelons the next month. And you just go through the fruits. As I read this again, I don't think that's right. Rather, I think that John is saying that each month this tree will produce 12 crops of fruit. That you're going to get the oranges and the blueberries and the watermelons and all of it every month. Because our God is a God of variety. Our God is a God who's always creating new. This is kind of a side note, but throughout my life I've heard several people say, how can you really enjoy heaven forever? Eternity is a really long time. No matter how good heaven is, eventually you're going to get bored. I think that vastly underestimates the creativity, the inventiveness of our God. Consider the universe we live in. Consider just how big it is. The scientists say there are 400 billion stars in our galaxy, maybe several times more than that. And there are at least 100 billion galaxies that we can see. That doesn't include all the galaxies that are so far away no telescope will ever see them. God has created all of this immense, unimaginably vast universe, and He created all of it to be destroyed. He created all of it with the intention that one day He would wipe it all away. If God has created this vast universe with the intention of getting rid of it, how much greater will the new heavens and the new earth be? The universe that God shall create, which shall never pass away. Eternity is a long time, but our God is infinitely creative. He is the God of variety. He is the God who is always making things new. No matter how long eternity is, God is creating new things in that eternity. So we'll have the river of the tree of life. Third, we'll have the leaves on the tree. And I say this as something separate because I like what John says about these leaves. He says the leaves are for the healing of the nations. These are leaves of healing, but what are they healing from? They're not a healing for disease or injury. We're already told those things won't be in heaven. Rather, this is a healing for energy. This is a healing of rejuvenation. These leaves bring new life. I know the unbelieving world tends to imagine heaven as a place where people sit around on clouds playing harps. I've got nothing against harps, nothing against sitting on clouds. Honestly, that sounds kind of amazing. But the Bible depicts heaven as a place of energy, a place of life, a place of rejuvenation. It's not a place where we're just sitting around all the time, but it's a place of activity. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations, the leaves that heal us, the weariness of this life. Heaven is the place where we never grow tired, where we never become weary, where our bodies do not wear out and our souls are not overwhelmed. It's a place of energy and life. And fourth, we're told that in heaven we'll be servants of God. And in heaven we will serve the Lord. Now, entire books have been written about what that means, but let me see if I can hit the highlights here. That in heaven we will have work. As I mentioned a few moments ago, there is work in heaven, but it is not a work of drudgery. It is not a futile work, but it is a work that brings satisfaction. And there are a variety of kinds of work in heaven. There are those who work with their hands. When God created Adam and Eve and put them in the Garden of Eden, He gave them a job. He said that they would tend the garden. And in heaven there will be those who continue to work, those who build and tend and construct, those who work with their hands. There will be the work of creation, those who write sonnets to the glory of God, who paint paintings and sculpt and bring new creations to life. There will be the work of performance, those who sing the praises of God, who bring joy and entertainment. There will be work in heaven. There will be a work that builds us up. Because heaven is a place for these servants of God. And so, as I'll close with this thought, heaven's not for everyone. What I mean is I think there are people who genuinely would not like heaven, at least based on how they live their lives on earth. Because heaven is a place of community with other Christians, a place of service, a place of praising God. And there are people who seem to really not like those things. There are people who actively avoid Christian fellowship. There are people who do not seem to like the idea of praise or service. There are those who are repulsed by the idea of bowing down to someone, even if that someone is God Almighty. But heaven is a place for those who desire to know the Lord. Rick Warren said, "This life is just practice for eternity." In eternity, we will have work. We will praise the Lord. We will see God face to face. If someone doesn't want that, I don't think God's going to force it upon them. But if we want that, if we want to be servants of the living God, if we want to know God, if we want Christian community and fellowship, let's live like it right now. In a moment, we're going to stand for our invitation here. And as we stand to sing, if you do want that, if you've been looking at your life saying, I've been going off after other things, and what I really want is to live the way I want to live for eternity. I want to see that change in my life. Then you have an opportunity today. If you need to make a commitment to God or to the church, if you need to turn your life around, this week, talk to myself, talk to one of the elders. If you need to make a commitment right now, you have that opportunity. I ask you'll stand with me for our invitation hymn, which is number 331, Room of the Cross. And we'll sing all the verses.